Lithuania, June 23, 1941, second day of Operation Barbarossa. Unteroffizier Hans Becker crouches behind his Pak-36 anti-tank gun. He's 24 years old. He's killed tanks before. French Renaults near Sedan, Polish 7TPs outside Warsaw. This gun has never failed him. 400 meters down the dirt road, something emerges from the tree line. At first, Becker thinks it's another BT-7 light tank, easy kill. But as it clears the shadows, he realizes this is different. The armor slopes at impossible angles. The tracks are wider than anything he's seen. It's moving fast, really fast. 50 kilometers per hour across broken ground. Becker's gun commander, Feldwebel Otto Schmidt, age 32, veteran of Poland and France, screams the order, fire. The 37mm shell leaves the barrel at 72 meters per second. Becker watches through the sight. Perfect hit, center mass on the hull. The shell bounces off, just bounces. Like throwing a rock at a cathedral wall, Schmidt orders another shot. Fire, another hit, another ricochet. The metallic ping echoes across the field. Third shot, fourth, fifth. Becker loses count. Each time the same result. The Soviet tank doesn't slow down, doesn't stop, doesn't even seem to notice. At 200 meters, it stops. The turret traverses, slow, deliberate. The sec-millimeter gun barrel centers on Becker's position. Becker sees Schmidt's face in that moment, sees the realization, sees the fear. Schmidt opens his mouth to give an order. The Soviet tank fires once. When the smoke clears, there's nothing left of the gun position, nothing left of Schmidt, nothing left of the three other men in the crew. Hans Becker survives only because he was 30 meters away fetching ammunition. He spends the next hour in a shell crater, shaking, unable to move. When recovery teams find him at dusk, he's catatonic. The medic's report notes, severe combat shock. Patient repeatedly states, "We hit it 23 times, 23 times." This scene repeated itself hundreds of times across the Eastern Front. In June, the tank was the Soviet T-34, and for months it seemed absolutely unstoppable. But this is not a story about invincibility. It's a story about adaptation, about desperation, about how thousands of soldiers like Hans Becker had to learn, had to evolve, or had to die. It's about how German forces went from complete helplessness against the T-34 to developing tactics that changed the entire war. This is about finding weakness in strength, about proving that no weapon, no matter how formidable, is invincible if you're willing to look close enough, if you're desperate enough to try. This is the real history of how the unstoppable tank was stopped. June 22nd, 1941. 3:15 in the morning. 3 million German soldiers cross into the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in human history. The Wehrmacht is confident. They crushed Poland in weeks. France fell in 6 weeks. Stalin's army is expected to collapse within 2 months. Every previous campaign has confirmed German tactical and technological superiority. Within 72 hours, that confidence begins to crack. Lieutenant Friedrich Weber, Panzer Commander, 6th Panzer Division, keeps a diary. It survives in military archives. His entry from June 24th reads, "Engaged unidentified Soviet tank at 700 meters. My gunner, Hoffman, is the best shot in the company. He never misses. He hit that Russian tank 5 times. 5 times. Each shell struck squarely. Each time we saw the flash of impact. The tank didn't stop. It fired once, penetrated our frontal armor. Hoffman died instantly. So did my loader, Koch. I ordered bailout. We abandoned the Panzer. The Soviet tank drove past us. Didn't even stop to finish us. Just kept going deeper into our lines. Like we didn't matter. Like we weren't even there. Weber's report reaches his company commander. The company commander reports to battalion to division. By the end of June, every level of German command from the front lines to Berlin knows the Wehrmacht faces a tank unlike anything encountered before. The T-34, Soviet designation, tank, model 1940. Production began at Kharkov Locomotive Factory in 1940. Full deployment, 1941. The Red Army has approximately 900 T-34s when Barbarossa begins. Not many by Soviet standards, but each one fights like 10. German intelligence scrambles to understand this new threat. Technical specifications from captured examples reveal the source of its dominance. 28 tons combat weight. 2 diesel engine producing 500 horsepower. Top speed, 50 kilometers per hour on roads, 30 off-road through mud and snow that immobilizes German panzers. The wide tracks distribute weight, giving it mobility in terrain where Wehrmacht vehicles bogged down. But speed isn't the killer. Armor is. 45 millimeters of frontal armor. That number alone isn't impressive. German intelligence officers studying the reports initially assume there's been a mistake. 45 millimeters should be penetrable by standard German anti-tank weapons. But there's a detail that changes everything: angle. Soviet designers sloped the T-34's armor at 60 degrees from vertical. A German engineer's report explains the devastating math. Sloped armor multiplies effective thickness. A shell striking at an angle must penetrate more metal than one striking perpendicularly. The T-34's 45mm armor at 60 degrees creates effective protection equivalent to 90 millimeters. Additionally, the slope increases ricochet probability. Shells striking at high angles deflect rather than penetrate. 90 millimeters effective. The German Panzer III, backbone of the Wehrmacht's armored force, has 30 millimeters of frontal armor. Even the Panzer IV, the heaviest tank in frontline service, mounts only 50 millimeters. The T-34 is better protected than any German tank in 1941. And its gun. The 6mm F-34 cannon can penetrate any German tank at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. German tanks must close to 400 meters or less to have any chance of return fire. That's well within the T-34's kill zone. For German soldiers facing this weapon, the implications are clear and terrifying. Every encounter is a death sentence. Obergefreiter Paul Richter, age 21, anti-tank gunner from Munich, writes home to his father in July 1941. The letter is intercepted by censors worried about morale. It's filed in archives rather than delivered. Father, I'm not supposed to write about this, but you should know. Our guns don't work. The Pak-36 we trained with, that we trusted with our lives, it's useless. We call it the door knocker now, because all it does is knock on their armor. Can't break through. Yesterday we engaged 3 Russian tanks. We hit the first one 11 times, 11 direct hits. It kept coming. It fired once. Our entire crew is dead except me and Schneider. Schneider won't stop shaking. He just sits there, shaking. Father, I don't know if I'll see home again. Pray for me. The psychological impact spreads like disease through German ranks. Soldiers who believed in technological superiority watched that belief shatter. Tank crews abandon perfectly functional panzers rather than face T-34s in direct combat. Anti-tank gun crews retreat without firing, knowing their weapons accomplish nothing except revealing their positions. A battalion commander's report from July 1941 states, "Morale crisis developing among pack units. Men are brave, disciplined, well-trained, but when they observe their shells ricochet while enemy advances, when they watch comrades die while accomplishing nothing, it breaks them. Multiple cases of combat fatigue, 2 cases of self-inflicted wounds to avoid combat. This is not cowardice. This is rational response to hopeless, tactical situation." By August 1941, the crisis reaches the highest levels of Wehrmacht command. Reports flow to Berlin. The message is unanimous and alarming. Without countermeasures, German forces cannot sustain offensive operations against Soviet armored units. On November 25, 1941, a commission arrives at the front. Led by Ferdinand Porsche, engineer responsible for German armored vehicle development, it includes technical experts from Krupp, Daimler-Benz, and Wehrmacht Ordnance Department. Their mission? Examine captured T-34s and K-1 heavy tanks, determine why they're superior, recommend responses. The commission spends 2 weeks at testing grounds near Minsk. They crawl over captured Ts. They fire German weapons at them, measuring penetration. They dissect every component. Their report, delivered December 10th, declassified decades later, is shockingly direct. The T-34 is the most advanced tank currently in service with any nation. It exceeds German designs in armor protection, armament, and mobility. The KV-1 heavy tank is even more formidable. Immediate response required development of heavy tanks mounting high-velocity 80 medium guns, sloped armor, increased horsepower. Estimated development time, minimum 18 months. 18 months. The report launches programs that eventually produce the Panther and Tiger tanks, but those won't reach combat until late 1942 and 1940. In the winter of 1941, summer of 1942, German soldiers faced T-34s with the same inadequate weapons. Something has to change immediately, not in Berlin's design bureaus, on the front, where men are dying. The change begins with observation. When you can't overpower an enemy, you study them. Every destroyed T-34 becomes a classroom. Every encounter becomes a lesson. Captain Erich Hartmann, not the famous fighter pilot, but a Panzer company commander in 11th Panzer Division, begins keeping detailed notes of every 34 engagement. He interviews survivors. He examines knocked-out Soviet tanks. He's looking for patterns, for weakness, for anything that might help his men survive. In December 1941, Hartmann gets access to a captured T-34 at a Wehrmacht testing facility near Kharkov. He spends 6 hours examining it. His report, preserved in division records, documents what he finds. The T-34's armor is formidable but not uniform. Frontal armor at 40 mm is effectively impenetrable to our weapons. However, variations exist. The turret ring, where the rotating turret meets the hull, measures approximately 37 to 40 millimeters with no sloping. This represents a vulnerability. The lower hull sides, behind the road wheels, measure approximately 40 millimeters at minimal angle, also vulnerable. The driver's vision port can be damaged by direct hits, potentially blinding the vehicle. Gun mantlet, while thick, has gaps in protection due to complex casting. Hartmann's report isn't unique. Across the Eastern Front, dozens of officers conduct similar analysis. An intelligence officer named Klaus Dagen examines weld seams on captured T-34s. His findings: quality varies dramatically. Some welds are excellent, others show insufficient penetration, poor technique. Dagen's report notes, TC production emphasizes speed over perfection. Soviet factories produce approximately 1,000 T-34s monthly. This requires rapid manufacturing. Welding quality suffers. Weak welds crack when struck by shells, even non-penetrating hits. Cracking creates spalling, internal metal fragments that injure crews. Additionally, weak welds in turret ring area may reduce effective armor thickness by 5 to 10 millimeters. These observations circulate through Wehrmacht command. They're compiled, analyzed, distributed. By January, but a picture emerges. The T-34 has weaknesses, small ones, difficult to exploit, but real. Now comes the harder part, turning knowledge into tactics, theory into survival. Hauptmann Werner Adelmann, commanding a pack battalion in 6th Army, lost 15 guns in 2 months fighting T-34s. 15 anti-tank guns, 90 dead crew members. For that sacrifice, his battalion destroyed exactly 4 Soviet tanks. The math is unsustainable. At that rate, his entire battalion will be dead within 8 weeks. Adelmann refuses to accept that outcome. He begins experimenting with tactics, different positions, different engagement ranges, different target selection. The breakthrough comes on February 3rd during a Soviet counterattack near Belgorod. Adelmann positions 3 Pak-38 guns, not blocking the main road as doctrine requires, but offset 300 meters to the side. Heavy camouflage, strict fire discipline. Orders: do not fire at approaching tanks. Let them pass. Only engage flank and rear. His gun commanders think he's insane. Letting enemy tanks pass your position violates every instinct, every drill, every training manual. But Adelmann is desperate enough to try anything. The Soviet attack begins at dawn. 8 T-34s advance in line formation down the road toward German defensive positions. They're moving fast, confident. They've broken through German lines a dozen times before. Why should today be different? The T-34s pass within 400 meters of Adelmann's hidden guns. Then 300. Gun crews watch through sights, fingers on triggers, holding fire. Waiting. The lead tank passes, then the second, third, fourth. Adelmann waits until 6 tanks are past his position. Then he gives the order, fire. 3 guns fire simultaneously at 3 different T-34s. Target: turret ring, side armor, lower hull. The first tier is hit in the turret ring. The shell, fired from a 50mm Pak-38 at 350 meters, striking 37mm armor with no angle, penetrates. Not a catastrophic kill. But the tank stops. Smoke pouring from the turret. Crew bails out. Second T-34 hit in the lower side hull. Penetration. The tank's track breaks, immobilizing it. It pivots, trying to bring its gun to bear. Adelmann's second gun fires again. Hit on turret ring. The tank's turret jams. Crew abandons. Third T-34 takes a hit in the rear engine deck. Fire erupts from the engine compartment. The tank accelerates, trying to escape, but the engine seizes. It coasts to a stop, burning. The remaining 5 T-34s scatter. Some try to charge the concealed positions, but they don't know exactly where the guns are. They fire blindly. Their shells land wide. Adelman's guns relocate, fire again. By the time the engagement ends 14 minutes later, 6 T-34s are destroyed or immobilized. German losses: 1 Pak-38 damaged by near miss, 1 man wounded by splinters, 0 dead, 6 Teat, same guns that were useless 3 months earlier. The only difference? How they were used. Adelman's after-action report spreads through 6th Army like fire. Company commanders read it. Battalion commanders distribute copies. Division commanders forward it to corps. By March 1942, similar tactics are being attempted across the entire Southern Front. The results transform the battlefield calculus. A report from 3rd Panzer Army dated April 15, 1942, states, implementation of flank attack doctrine against T-34 has reduced Pak gun losses by 60%, while increasing Soviet tank kills by 50%, recommended for immediate adoption across all anti-tank units. For tank crews, the adaptation follows a similar pattern. Major General Erich Schneider, commanding 14th Panzer Division, develops coordinated attack tactics. Not based on theory, based on what works, what keeps his tank crews alive. The doctrine: never fight T1-on-1, never engage frontally if alternatives exist, use numbers, use terrain, use distraction. Schneider's tank battalions train the new tactics relentlessly. 4 Panzer IIIs engage a T-34 from the front. They fire continuously, maneuver aggressively, create smoke, draw attention. The Soviet commander focuses on these threats, tracks them, tries to line up shots while avoiding their fire. Meanwhile, 2 more German tanks use terrain to flank. Hills, buildings, tree lines, anything that breaks line of sight. When they reach the T-34's side or rear, they close to 200 meters and fire into vulnerable zones. Turret ring, lower hull, engine deck, the tactics work. A combat report from 16th Panzer Division describes an engagement on May 8, 1942. Encountered 5 T-34s during advance near Kharkov. Engaged using coordinated flank tactics. 4 Panzer IIIs conducted frontal harassment, while 2 Panzer IVs maneuvered through village outskirts to achieve flank position. T-Wers focused on frontal threat, unaware of flanking force until engagement. 4 TV destroyed, 1 escaped. Our losses: 1 Panzer III mobility kill from track damage, crew recovered, no fatalities. 4 T-34s destroyed with no German deaths. The same division lost 12 tanks to Teats in January with kill ratios of 3-1 against them. Now they're winning, but there's one more weapon that changes everything. The 88mm Flak 36-37 anti-aircraft gun was never designed to fight tanks. It's huge, tall, heavy, hard to conceal. It takes a crew of 11 to operate. Moving it requires a half-track tractor. But its shells can penetrate 120 millimeters of armor at 1,000 meters. Against T-30s, it's devastating. Absolutely devastating. Oberleutnant Hans Schmidt, commanding an 88mm battery near Voronezh, describes the weapon's effectiveness in a letter to his brother. The A8 has changed the war. We position it at long range, well concealed. When T-34s appear, we engage from Konsttilschert to 100 meters. At that distance, they can't even see us clearly, can't return accurate fire, but we can see them perfectly through our sights. 1 hit is usually enough. Sometimes the T-34 just stops, crew dead from overpressure even without full penetration. Other times, it brews up immediately. The Russians call the 88 the door of death. I understand why. Wehrmacht begins deploying 88s in ground roles despite their vulnerability. The doctrine is simple: long-range interdiction. Let T-34s approach within 100 meters, fire, destroy, relocate before Soviet artillery can respond. The statistics tell the story of transformation. In June, German anti-tank units engaged Tuss at loss ratios of approximately 8-1 against them. 8 German guns destroyed for every Tir killed. By June, those ratios have inverted. German forces destroy T-34s at ratios approaching 2-1 in their favor. The T hasn't gotten weaker. German soldiers have gotten smarter. A tactical directive dated May 15th, now from Wehrmacht High Command, codifies the new doctrine. T-34 and KV tanks are superior to our armored vehicles in frontal engagement. Frontal attacks are forbidden except in emergency. Mandatory tactics: flank attack with target priority on turret ring, side armor, rear, coordinate tank, and anti-tank gun operations. Deploy 88mm guns for long-range interdiction. When other options unavailable, infantry close assault with magnetic mines and demolition charges. Patience and positioning defeat armor superiority. Hans Becker, the young gunner who watched his entire crew die in June 1941, survives the war. In 1940s, interviewed by American military historians researching German tactics, he describes his experience. After that first encounter, I thought we'd all die, that the T-34 would just roll over us until nothing was left. But we learned, we adapted. We stopped trying to fight them the way we'd fought French tanks. We learned patience. We learned to wait for the right shot instead of taking every shot. By 1942, I wasn't afraid of T's anymore. I respected them, but I knew how to kill them. But the Soviets weren't static. They learned it too. They always learned. By autumn 1942, Soviet tank commanders adapt to German tactics. They stop advancing in predictable lines. They use smoke for concealment. They coordinate with infantry scouts who sweep for hidden anti-tank positions. They avoid long flank exposures. They learn where German 88s typically position and call artillery strikes on those areas. And Soviet engineers go to work on the tank itself. Analysis of destroyed T-34s shows patterns. Concentrations of hits in specific zones. The turret ring especially. Reports go to Stalin. Stalin orders fixes immediately. Starting in August 1942, new production T-34s include modifications, additional 20mm armor plates welded over the turret ring, improved weld quality with stricter oversight. Better crew training, side armor skirts on some models. The modifications add 200 kilograms, reduce top speed by 3 kilometers per hour. But they eliminate the most critical vulnerability. The biggest change comes later. The T-34-85, introduced in 1944, mounts an 85mm gun, has a 3-man turret allowing the commander to actually command instead of also aiming and loading, improved armor, better visibility. It's a substantially superior tank. But that's a different story, a different year. By then, the war has changed again. Friedrich Weber, the Panzer lieutenant, whose gunner died in June '41, survives until March 1940. He's promoted to Hauptmann, commands a company, fights from Russia to Germany. In a post-war interview, he reflects, "The T-34 was the best tank of the early war, no question. It forced us to evolve or die. Most of us died anyway, but those who survived learned that superiority isn't permanent, that every strength has a weakness, that desperation breeds innovation. The T-34 taught us that, cost us tens of thousands of lives to learn it, but we learned. By war's end, the Soviet Union produces over 84,000 T-34s, more than any other tank in history. The Germans produce about 6,000 Panthers and 100 Tigers. In response, the numbers tell their own story. The T-34 remains one of the greatest tanks ever built. Its influence on tank design lasts decades. Sloped armor becomes standard. Mobility becomes priority. The T-34's legacy shapes every tank that follows. American historian Stephen Zaloga, one of the world's foremost experts on Soviet armor, concludes, "The T-34 revolutionized armored warfare. It forced Germany to completely rethink tank design, leading to the Panther and Tiger. It influenced American and British tank development. Its combination of firepower, protection, and mobility set the standard for main battle tanks for generations. But it wasn't perfect. It wasn't invincible. Its greatest weaknesses were operational, not technical. Poor crew visibility, two-man turret overworking the commander, lack of radios in early models. German forces exploited these human factors as effectively as they exploited structural weaknesses. The T-34 was a brilliant machine crewed by men with limitations. Germany couldn't match the machine, so they outfought the men inside it. That's the real lesson, not about armor thickness or gun caliber, about adaptation, about refusal to accept defeat, about finding advantages where none seem to exist. June 1941. A German gun crew fires 23 shells at a T-34 and accomplishes nothing. The tank seems invincible. Men die believing they face an enemy that cannot be stopped. June 1942. German gun crews destroy 7 T in 14 minutes using the same weapons. Men live because they learned where to aim, when to fire, how to fight. The guns didn't improve. The T-34 remained formidable. What changed was everything between the gun and the target. Understanding, tactics, patience, the willingness to learn from every failure, every death, every small victory. This wasn't one soldier making one discovery. This was thousands of soldiers contributing pieces to a puzzle. One officer noticed weak welds. Another identified the turret ring. A gun crew proved flanking worked. A tank commander perfected distraction tactics. An artillery officer demonstrated long-range dominance. Individually, these discoveries were incremental. Together, they transformed the equation from hopeless to survivable. The Eastern Front was the largest, bloodiest theater of World War II. Over 30 million Soviet citizens died. Millions of German soldiers never came home. The T-34 was part of that story. A weapon that helped the Soviet Union push back invasion and eventually march to Berlin. For the Soviet people, the T-34 represents resilience, industrial might, the triumph of their great patriotic war. But for a brief, terrible period, the T-34 seemed to herald German defeat, seemed to prove that technological superiority determined victory, that better weapons guaranteed success. The soldiers who faced those tanks, who watched friends die, who saw their weapons fail, refused to accept that narrative. They looked closer. They thought harder. They adapted faster. They proved that in war, as in everything, no advantage is permanent, no weapon is perfect, no enemy is invincible. Hans Becker, The 24-year-old gunner who survived when his crew didn't returns to Germany in 1940. He lives until 1987. In his final interview before his death, recorded by his grandson, he's asked what he learned from the war. He's quiet for a long time. Then he says, "I learned that feeling helpless and being helpless are different things. That first day, when our shells bounced off that tank, when Schmidt died, when I hid in that crater shaking, I felt helpless. I was sure I'd die, that we'd all die, but we weren't helpless. We just didn't know how to fight yet. Once we learned, once we understood, the T-34 stopped being invincible. It was still dangerous, still deadly, but we could fight it. We could win. That's what I learned. Feeling helpless is temporary. Being helpless is a choice. Every strength hides a weakness. Every advantage has a counter. Every seemingly invincible enemy has a vulnerability. You just have to be desperate enough to look for it, smart enough to find it, and brave enough to exploit it. The T-34 was a great tank. Perhaps the greatest of its era, a masterpiece of design that changed armored warfare forever. But it wasn't unstoppable, because nothing ever is. That's the truth the German soldiers of 1941 and 1942 learned in blood and fire. That's the lesson that transcends tanks and battlefields. That's the story worth remembering. Not that the T-34 was invincible, but that even when facing the invincible, human beings find a way. They always do.